Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to join us on this webinar. Over the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to be diving into the world of brand suitability and brand safety for podcast advertising. And especially for you today, we're also going to be looking at the uniqueness of the Middle East region. Why is it so unique and what is special about it? So just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Susie. I am the Chief of Content and Marketing for Next Broadcast Media, and it's great to see you here. Just quickly before we begin, I wanted to emphasize that this is a private invite-only webinar, and you are here because we've invited you as a valued member of the NBM community. And this means that also this video won't be put on YouTube or anywhere else for public consumption. You don't need to be making a million notes. It's okay. I will follow up with some information after the webinar. And you can always reach out to myself, Adil, Lemia, anybody on the team, and we can refresh what we talked about or send you some more information. So let's get on with our webinar today. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about brand safety suitability for podcast advertising, and I have got the expert in the field with me today to help us talk about this, and that is the lovely Tamara. She knows everything there is about this topic, and she is also the CEO and co-founder of Barometer. Barometer is an AI-powered contextual brand suitability tool designed for the podcast environment and the new strategic partner for Next Broadcast Media. We have brought them on board as an expert, and we are pleased to be sharing all this information with you just to up your knowledge on audio advertising and how we can help you. So let me hand over to Tamara, and she's going to be going into the topic.
Thanks so much, Susie, for having me. And hello, Next Broadcast Media community. It's my pleasure to be sharing about this exciting new partnership with you. Today, I will briefly introduce the concepts of brand safety and suitability, how they're unique for podcasting, show you guys the Barometer tool that allows advertisers to instantly assess podcasts for brand safety and suitability, and excitingly reveal the very first ever implementation of the solution for the Middle East region, specifically with the Next Broadcast Media content. So with lots of excitement, I'll just dive right into it. So like Susie said, Barometer is a brand suitability, brand safety, and contextual targeting solution. What does that all mean? Brand safety is not a new concept. It's been around for a really long time, and it really just has to do with making sure that brands align with content that upholds their brand standards. And so this is, it really has a lot of individuality to every brand about what types of content they feel are suitable. And there's a really amazing organization called the World Federation of Advertisers that has created a working group called Global Alliance for Responsible Media to define brand safety and brand suitability. And so that's the definitions that we use and enforce as well. We are an active member of the Global Alliance for Responsible Media and work closely with them to develop the definitions for audio. And so brand suitability really is a spectrum. We start with several categories like adult content or profanity, guns, drugs, and a brand can define their tolerance or their standards across each of these categories. And then what Barometer does is it's an AI that listens to all the podcasts and analyzes them for discussions of those categories and topics relating to them so that you can instantly assess any piece of content without having to go listen to it yourself. And so I will share with you what the platform looks like so that we can kind of put a name to a face. So this is Barometer. Here you can see we've got data on over 25,000 podcasts. And in this view, you can actually see the table of brand suitability data. So up top here in this table are the main categories. So you can see the titles are like adult content, profanity, this relates to politics. And then below here, you've got this table of shows. And so you can see the name of a specific show, the average risk level for each category, and then an indicator about the episode by episode variations. So we know just a show can have any number of episodes and every episode is a little bit different. So to help us fully understand the show, we indicate what percentage of episodes were exceeding the average risk level or are below the average risk level. And so I'm going to pull up a dashboard that has some shows that we should all know about. These are from the Edison Top 50 from last year. And I'll kind of show you in a little bit more detail some of the stuff that Barometer can do. So you can click into any show and you can actually see an episode by episode breakdown of all episodes that have been analyzed for the show. And then you can actually click on any show and see the full layout of everything that's been flagged. So you can click on anything, it'll take you to that point in the content, and you never have to take our word for it. This is really helpful in kind of giving you the overall picture of a show. And what's particularly useful is the filters. So say you are an advertiser who maybe you don't want to be associated with high levels of profanity, something like that show that we just looked at. With just one click, you can instantly refine the inventory set that you're going to be running over to exclude any shows that are high risk for profanity. So now we can filter it back, and you can see the maximum risk level that we should see here would be medium, and that is in fact true. In addition to flagging this GARM-related topics and subtopics, we also flag just the general context of the show. So you may know genre is a property that's passed down by the publisher. So every show has a genre, but shows may also be talking about things that aren't necessarily reflected in their genre. So a really nice example is actually this podcast, this H3 podcast, which it is branded as comedy and it's been around for a really long time. It's about video games. However, we found that recently this content actually drifted. So episodes that started coming out after October 7th, we found talking about war and conflicts and politics. And so when we dive in, we can actually see like, oh, there was some like pretty throughout discussion of terrorism. And so for that reason, it's a great idea to be able to look at not just the negative flags, but also the contextual flags so that you can really understand what's in that piece of content and then refine accordingly. Okay. Well, I guess now, without further ado, the moment that we've really all been waiting for is seeing this all come to life in Arabic. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our all shows dashboard. Give me just a moment. All shows. There we go. And while that's loading, I'll briefly talk about some of the other filters here. So in addition to being able to filter by those risk levels that we saw, you can also filter contextually by those IAB categories. So beyond genre, you can find even more contextually relevant stuff or exclude things like we just saw with the war and conflicts. And you can sort by genre, by publisher, and most recently by language. So let's pull up all of the Arabic content that we have in here. And as you now know, Next Broadcast Media is the very first publisher in the Middle East to make their data available for us to analyze and then for you to be able to make use of this data for your advertising. And so it's quite exciting to be able to show you all of this amazing content and then the same ability for you to be able to filter based on your standards. So I'm going to expand my view so that we can see about 100 shows in one. And then we can organize them in alphabetical order just so that we know kind of what we're looking at. So what's really cool is you can do the same thing. So you can actually click on a show or an episode, and then you can click on what's been flagged, and you can see what was flagged, and you can click on it and it takes you there. So it works exactly the same. It's pretty cool. And there's really a lot of information that you could get out of this. Most importantly, that ability to filter. So say you were coming in here and you really wanted to avoid content that was, say, talking about like conflict, maybe war or something like that. So there's actually a variety of levers that you can use to enforce your standard there. One thing that you could do is you could say, okay, I'm going to lower the tolerance for death and military conflict from high to, let's say, medium or even low. And then what's cool is you can instantly see the impact of making that change. So you
Mhm.
lost 6 shows, but that's only 6 shows out of 100. And now you feel more safe about where you know that you're going to run. You can do the same thing for crime and human rights violations, and they might be correlated. So you may not lose that many shows. Yep, as expected, you're still at 95. And then you may also choose terrorism as one that you might have a strong perspective on, maybe even low or medium. And again, we'll expect some overlap. So you only lost
Yeah.
one more show. So as you can see, there's 94 incredible shows here that you can absolutely run on that meet your standard of not having any discussion of the topics that you seek to avoid. And if you were really concerned and you were like, oh, like medium's too much, you could always refine further or make exceptions on a show or genre basis.
Yeah.
What's cool about Barometer is you might find that some of this content could be like true crime or something like that. And so in that case, they might be talking about a human rights violation, but it's not in the context of a real war. And so you might determine that for your brand, that's actually totally cool. And the audience of that show might be perfect for who you're trying to reach. So with Barometer, you can really refine and pinpoint your exact brand standard to make sure that every place that you're running, you're going to be comfortable in. Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. That's so cool. I think what's so nice is when it comes to audio is you can say something and has many meanings. I think I've heard you before use the example of like a shot. It
Hmm.
could be a gun, it could be an injection, it could be a basketball shot. Like there's just is a lot of context, and when it comes to audio, it's very different to visual, and it needs this unique approach that something is built for the audio environment.
That's such a
And
good point. And I didn't
yeah.
really speak to that. So the original definitions when they were written for display. So high risk for adult was literally defined as like full nudity.
Okay.
And so how do you expand that for audio? And to your
Uh-huh.
point, how do you capture that tone and the context? So the
Mhm.
way that we actually do it, the traditional way, the historical way that doesn't really work is keywords. So they would have like a keyword list and then they'd look for them. But like you said, like a shot could be a basketball shot or shooting a movie or
Yeah.
shooting, I don't know, lots of things could be
Yeah.
shot besides a gun. And you can talk about shooting a gun in a variety of different ways.
Hmm.
So for us, we have a 3-step process. First, we recognize when the topic of interest we think is being talked about. And so at that point, we don't know which shot it was.
Yeah.
And then the second layer, we add like an indicator of the overall context. So maybe there's something in there that's talking about sports. Maybe there's something in there that's talking about Hollywood. And then finally, even if we know that we're talking about the thing we think we're talking about, we might be talking about it in a variety of different ways. So we might be like really emotional about it, or we might be really negative about it. And that's another thing that we can pick up on is
Hmm.
like how glamorizing or dramatic the
Yeah.
discussion
Yes.
is.
Yeah, totally. Because if you're doing like saying your biography and you want to include it, it's captivating for someone and you're not glamorizing it or anything. It's part of the story. And that's why podcasts are so great. And that's why we listen. So yeah.
Precisely.
And I think one thing as well from that demo that we just saw, you saw when we were filtering out, there was, not a lot of changes, but that's because traditionally Arabic podcast content is more brand safe than, say, American content and such. So really this tool is going to be super powerful for suitability to make sure you're aligned to, you're aligning yourself correctly. You're not excluding
Yes.
things, you're including things. I
That's
think
so
that.
true, Susie. And we saw so many incredible indicators that point to a confirmation of the statement you just made. And in fact, we're working on officially the analysis that would compare the content compared to the national averages of American content that we looked at last year.
Mhm.
But just anecdotally, I've
Yeah.
noticed almost a complete absence of any profanity. With very, very few exceptions, very, very little adult content, unless it is explicitly in the context of like there was a show about sexual health. And
Yeah.
so that was an appropriate, it wasn't like
Mhm.
a adult explicit like type of a
Mhm.
like an anecdote or something like
Yeah.
that. It was very contextually appropriate.
Mhm.
No discussions really about drugs or alcohol. And what also I noticed was the political discussions tend to be rather consistent. So, like,
Okay.
either a show is talking about the political discussions or they're not, and there's tons of shows about, like, art or medicine,
Mhm.
and science, and so there was really a lot of incredibly suitable educational content that we came across.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. That's great. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us today. And I hope watching this webinar, you have got a bit more understanding of this tool and the power of audio and how it can really help you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tamara. And if you're interested in learning more about this tool and how we can help you, be sure to reach out to myself or any of the team at Next Broadcast Media. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.